But Sean, I am curious. You know, you say you don't believe in Keynesian economics and you just want to leave it at that. But I mean, you got to give me something else. I guess, you know, in a situation where you have a major kind of, you know, housing bubble burst or something like that, where you have a big downturn. I mean, what do you think is the role of the federal government in a situation like that? Should they just do
Well,
nothing? Should they start cutting departments or cutting budgets? You know, what is the appropriate response, would you say?
Well, for the most part, I don't want them to do a lot. I like the reason I believe in Austrian economics is because Austrian economists predicted the housing bubble. I mean, you could go on YouTube and look up Peter Schiff was right, and you'll see him from 2002 all the way on predicting that there's going to be a crash in the housing market. But what I believe should happen is that interest rates should rise, and what you call it, the housing prices have to fall. They were way overinflated by the artificially low interest rates, and basically the economy has to reset itself.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, I don't think the Austrian economics, you know, students of Austrian economics were the only people who saw that we had a wildly overinflated residential mortgage market. There were a lot of people that were saying that, but they were considered, you know, basically buzzkills. They were crapping on what was this great kind of industry and everything. So I don't think exclusively, you know, folks from that sort of perspective were the only ones that saw this. I think anybody that is paying attention to the fact that underlying wages are not increasing, but the value of homes is increasing dramatically, is going to see that you're going to hit a wall there. There's going to be an issue at some point.
I
Um,
mean, I mean, like
yeah.
I'm not saying that only Austrian economists predicted the crash, but like a majority of Austrian economists were predicting a housing bubble crash. A lot of the big Keynesians were not predicting a crash. I mean, Ben Bernanke is one of the obvious ones, along with the Peter Schiff is right video. You could watch Ben Bernanke was wrong, and you see he's wrong every step of the way. And you could see them go. You could see guys like Schiff go up against economists on like these CNBC shows, and they're all laughing at him for predicting a crash, and they're predicting that the good times will never end.
Hmm.
So like when you have people who are writing a book about how the crash is going to happen before it happens, and then you have people saying that everything's perfect, I tend to agree with the people who are actually right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can certainly see some of that. I feel like just because somebody makes one correct prediction doesn't mean that their entire worldview is correct either.
Well,
Uh,
I didn't mean it like that, but I mean if in Peter Schiff's book Crash Proof, he predicts the crash, and then he predicts that there will be stimulus. He predicts that there will be monetary stimulus. Like he predicts what the Fed will do in response to it, and then explains why it's wrong.
mhm.
Like it,
But basically that resetting that you're talking about, you know, you think that that the market should completely reset itself. I mean, what is not being, what you're not sort of mentioning in that is that a reset basically means millions of people losing their homes, becoming totally destitute. You know, there are there are things that I mean, you can put a value on that stuff as well if you want to actually, you know, quantify it in a dollar sense. But there is an enormous amount of human suffering that comes with just riding the market however it's going to go. And we had, you know, a fairly unregulated market before we did things like Glass-Steagall, all this kind of stuff, where, you know, there really were boom and bust cycles. And yes, the market corrected itself, but in the course of doing that, you wind up having people losing everything. And I
well,
think that we probably want a more stable system than something like that.
I mean, the boom. Well, this is like what causes the business cycle, and this is a big thing about Austrian economic theory. And I believe that the Federal Reserve, artificially setting interest rates too low, is what drives the business cycle. I mean, you have a lot of people making the same mistake because they're getting the same signals from the market and or from the Fed. All right, that doesn't happen in a system without the Federal Reserve.
All right.
Like
Well,
the central bank is directing all of this money, well, directed all of this money into the housing bubble, and then we had a crash. Like I don't want a Federal Reserve directing any money anywhere because I don't want another crash. Like that's what causes the bubbles.
yeah, I look. I think there's definitely a lot of validity to that, and I think home ownership has been made a priority to a level that it shouldn't be, because for a lot of people, renting is definitely a better option than buying a home. I think the flip side is, from what I understand, I don't think Peter Schiff is all that into any kind of redistribution of income or wealth. And basically, if you don't allow for some kind of redistribution in the system, and after all of the gains and all of the wealth that we've seen in the last several decades continues to compile in one area, the entire system fails to operate. You need a broad center that has purchasing power. Otherwise, there's no amount of investment from the top that's going to spur any kind of consumption if there's no money to consume. So I certainly think that he's got components of it right. I wouldn't disagree with that, but I think that to take the whole economic view, because there are components of it that are right, and
Well, I mean, there's books
right,
and
I
like
just disagree with that.
there's books and all this that I can't like recite on spot, but like he would argue, and Austrian economists would argue, he's just one example. They would argue that in an inflationary system driven by the Federal Reserve, the benefits always are going to go to the top. So it's the central bank that's causing the what you call it, the great disparity between the rich and the poor. The fact that it's a basic because when monetary inflation happens, it takes a while for price inflation to happen. So the first people who get the money get all of the benefits of monetary inflation, and that would be the banks. And then they lend it out or whatever, and that money becomes less and less valuable when the consumer goes to spend it. So the banks are getting real assets and real wealth while the consumer's getting ripped off. Like that would be the argument that this again, it's another argument against the central bank.
Yeah. Well, look, again, I can certainly see merit in some of those things. I think that they are taken kind of to a bit of an extreme in certain areas, and I think that there's a lot of stuff. Moderation is really kind of the key, and to go fully with no kind of government intervention, I think winds up leaving a lot of people to truly fend for themselves, which in a system where there are people with huge advantage is not really going to work out well for most people.